The body keeps the score. So does the boy inside the man. The kite was Ethan Carter's idea, built the way he did most things at 7, with complete seriousness and no help from anyone. He had watched a YouTube tutorial 3 times the night before: construction paper, wooden dowels, string borrowed from the garage. He had drawn it in his sketchpad first to make sure it would work. It was early September in suburban Ohio, the air carrying that first sharp hint of autumn. At recess, while other boys played pickup basketball, Ethan ran across the blacktop near the hoops, sneakers slapping asphalt. For one brief, perfect second the kite climbed, a bright red triangle against a pale blue Midwestern sky. Then it veered sideways into the maple tree near the fence. A few boys laughed. "Dude, just buy one from Target." Ethan tried to climb the lower branch and slipped. His palms stung. He was standing there, hands reddened, staring up at the ruined kite, when he heard his father's voice. Richard Carter had parked near the curb early for pickup. He stood by his truck with his arms folded. "Ethan, leave it. If you're going to do something, do it right. No hug. No good try. Just correction." That evening, while ESPN murmured in the living room and the smell of reheated leftovers drifted through the house, Ethan sat on his bedroom floor with his spiral sketchpad. He drew the kite soaring perfectly. He drew himself smiling. He drew a father clapping. He was already learning to move disappointment somewhere private. At 10, he ran the 100-meter dash at field day and finished second. His classmates high-fived him. His father folded his arms on the way home. "You've got potential," Richard said, the radio playing softly between them. "But potential doesn't mean anything if you don't win." Ethan stared at passing strip malls and said nothing. That night he drew himself on a first-place podium. He was still drawing. But he was also already practicing a different skill, swallowing what he felt and filing it somewhere out of sight. There was the birthday party incident, too, the one he never mentioned to anyone. He was 6, and Mrs. Holloway had invited the whole first-grade class to her backyard. There was a pinata and a slip and slide and a dog named Biscuit who kept stealing the streamers. Ethan had spent 2 weeks making a card for the birthday girl, Maya, a hand-drawn portrait of her in crayon with her name lettered carefully across the top. He was proud of it in the quiet, serious way he was proud of all the things he made. Maya opened it, looked at it for 1 second, and set it aside without comment. She tore into the next gift, a toy from Target in a glossy box, with shrieking delight. Ethan watched from behind the picnic table. He ate his cake slowly. He didn't say anything. On the drive home his father asked if he'd had fun and Ethan said yes, and meant it enough that it was not quite a lie. That night he drew a better card, one with a border, and flowers, and the lettering done in 2 colors. He kept it in his sketchpad. He didn't know why. It was the first thing he ever made for an audience that kept instead for himself. At 8, he broke his wrist jumping from the neighbor's retaining wall on a dare. He did not cry in front of the other boys. He walked the 2 blocks home holding his arm to his chest, the pain a bright, specific thing he catalogued calmly in his mind. His mother gasped when she opened the door. His father arrived home from work 2 hours later while Ethan was watching television with a cast already on, eating a sleeve of crackers. "You okay?" Richard asked, setting his bag down. "Fine," Ethan said. His father nodded once and went to change his clothes. And that was that, no fuss, no hovering. Ethan understood even then that this was how men in his family operated. You absorbed damage. You didn't broadcast it. Years later, sitting across from a cardiologist, he would try to trace the origin of that belief and arrive, again, at this moment, 8 years old, crackers on his lap, wrist throbbing, saying fine. There was also the matter of his mother, Sandra, who moved through their home with a kind of practiced cheerfulness that Ethan understood, later, to be its own form of suppression. She baked on Sundays. She kept the house immaculate. She laughed easily and warmly at dinner. But sometimes, when Ethan came downstairs in the night for a glass of water, he would find her sitting at the kitchen table with nothing in front of her. No book, no phone, no task, just her hands folded and her eyes looking at something he couldn't see. He never asked her what she was thinking. She never offered. They both poured glasses of water and said goodnight. The house taught silence the way school taught reading, systematically, without announcing that a lesson was underway. When Ethan was 9, his father coached his youth soccer team for half a season before a work schedule change made it impossible. Those 8 weeks were the closest thing to uncomplicated joy Ethan had known with Richard Carter. His father was different on the field, Looser, louder, quick to joke with the other boys in a way he never was at home. He called Ethan E-Man in front of the team and once, after a particularly scrappy win against a team from the next town over, put his arm around Ethan's shoulders for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Ethan counted them without meaning to. He drew the scene later from memory: the field, the muddy cleats, his father's arm, the light going flat and golden in that early October way, and kept the drawing in the back of his sketchpad where he kept the things he didn't want anyone to question. The season ended. The coaching ended. His father went back to being the man who folded his arms and assessed. Ethan kept trying to earn those 3 seconds back. He just never called it that. Middle school made the lesson explicit. The locker room was a classroom of its own. Don't be soft. Man up. Stop being dramatic. By junior year he was in AP Calculus and on the varsity track team. He stopped bringing his sketchbook to school after a classmate flipped through it during study hall and asked, with theatrical surprise, "You trying to be an artist now?" The laughter was brief but enough. That weekend he packed the sketchbook into a storage box in his closet, between old Little League trophies and SAT prep books. He doubled down instead. Late nights. College applications. Scholarship essays. When the acceptance letter came from the University of Michigan, his father shook his hand like he'd just signed a contract. "Proud of you, son." That word, proud, landed heavier than any trophy Ethan had ever won. He understood without being told. This was the exchange. Performance for approval. Achievement for love. He would make that trade for the next 20 years without realizing it was costing him something he could not replace. Ann Arbor winters were brutal. Ethan kept his side of the freshman dorm immaculate: color-coded binders, engineering textbooks stacked precisely, protein bars lined in his desk drawer. While his roommate gamed with headphones on, Ethan worked. One night, during a power outage after a heavy snowstorm, he opened a notebook and began sketching a redesigned dorm building: sustainable materials, open courtyards, wide windows. He was still at it an hour later when his roommate glanced over. "Bro, architecture is across campus." Ethan closed the notebook slowly. He didn't open it again that year. He graduated with honors. He smiled in every photo. Family friends commented online, "Future CEO." He met Olivia Bennett at a 4th of July barbecue in Chicago hosted by mutual friends. String lights, cornhole boards, country music from a Bluetooth speaker. She noticed him checking work emails and walked over. "Do you ever unplug?" she asked. They talked for 2 hours, about college football, dorm life, growing up in structured households. At some point she asked what he'd done just for fun. He hesitated. "I used to draw." Her face lit up. "Why'd you stop?" It didn't make sense career-wise. She took a sip of lemonade and looked at him directly. Not everything has to become a resume line. Nobody had ever said that to him before. He turned it over in his mind for days afterward, the way you handle an unfamiliar object, uncertain whether it's fragile. He texted their mutual friend Darius the next morning. Casual. 3 words: "Tell me about Olivia." Darius called back within the hour and talked for 40 minutes. She was a public health researcher. She'd done field work in Ghana for a year after graduate school. She ran half marathons. She believed in cooking full meals on weeknights even when tired. She was, Darius said, relentlessly present in a way that makes you feel like the only person in the room. Ethan said nothing for a moment. Then, "Does she know any structural engineers?" Darius laughed so hard Ethan had to hold the phone away from his ear. Their first date was coffee at a small place near the lake. Olivia was already there when he arrived, reading a paperback with a broken spine, half a latte gone. She looked up without embarrassment about being early. He liked that immediately. He was always early too and had spent years pretending he wasn't. They sat for 3 hours. He told her about the engineering firm, the projects, the metrics. She listened with her chin in her hand and didn't interrupt, but when he finally wound down she tilted her head and asked, "What's the most beautiful thing you've ever built?" He thought of the building he designed in his notebook during the power outage at Michigan. He thought of the kite. He said, "Nothing I've been paid for yet." She looked at him with an expression he didn't know how to read yet, something between recognition and sorrow. "That's either very humble or very sad," she said. "I can't decide which." He walked her to the train station and they stood for a few minutes longer than necessary. When she finally descended the steps she turned once and waved, a small, deliberate wave, not a performance. He walked back to his car and sat in it for 10 minutes without starting it. The courtship moved at his pace on the outside and her pace on the inside. He planned dinners carefully. She derailed them pleasantly, suggesting they skip the reservation and get street tacos instead, pulling him into a bookstore that was about to close, talking him into a third drink when they'd both said they had early mornings. He discovered that he liked being derailed. He had not known this about himself before. On their 5th date, she asked to see his apartment. He spent 2 days preparing, cleaning what was already clean, arranging what was already arranged, removing the engineering journals from the coffee table as though they were incriminating evidence of who he actually was. When she arrived and looked around, she bypassed the tasteful furniture and the neat bookshelves and went straight to the one personal object he'd failed to clear away, a framed pencil sketch, half-finished, propped against the wall behind the sofa. It was the dorm building from Ann Arbor, open courtyards, sustainable arches, wide windows letting the winter light in. He had found it while moving apartments 2 years earlier and couldn't explain why he'd kept it. "You drew this," Olivia said. "Not a question. A long time ago." She picked it up carefully. "The way you hold something you understand is more fragile than it looks." "This should be finished," she said. "I mean that." He didn't finish it. But he also didn't put it away. She was the one who named it first. They were in Lincoln Park on a Sunday in October, 9 months into whatever this was, the leaves going gold and the air carrying that first cold edge, and Olivia stopped walking and looked at him with a directness he had come to love and fear in equal measure. "I'm in love with you," she said. "I'm not telling you that to pressure you. I'm telling you because I don't hold on to things like that." He looked at her for a long moment. A cyclist passed. A child shrieked somewhere near the fountain. "I think I have been for a while," he said finally. "I just kept waiting until I was sure." Sure of what? He couldn't answer that exactly. Sure that he deserved it, maybe. Sure that it wouldn't be taken back. She seemed to understand the shape of the silence, even if not its specific contents, and she took his hand and they kept walking. They married 3 years later in a small church ceremony followed by a reception at a downtown loft. He promised stability. She promised partnership. Both believed they were promising the same thing. Ethan joined a structural engineering firm in downtown Chicago. Open office floor plan, glass conference rooms, performance metrics reviewed quarterly. He arrived before sunrise some days, gym bag over one shoulder, coffee in hand. He stayed after most others had gone home. By his 3rd year, he understood something that wasn't written in the employee handbook. Performance mattered, but perception mattered more. The office was open concept, and corner proximity meant visibility, which meant influence, which meant opportunity. Ethan's desk was near the printers. He told himself it was practical. But symbolism lived everywhere in corporate America, and he noticed it the way you notice a draft, through the back of the neck, before you can name the source. When the senior project lead position opened, 3 co-workers told him quietly, "It's yours." Then came the outside hire, Ryan Peterson. MBA. Polished presenter. Confident in rooms. Ryan didn't work longer hours. He worked socially. He scheduled touch-base meetings with senior leadership. He volunteered to present slides Ethan had built. In quarterly town halls he asked questions, not too critical, not too safe, just visible enough. He lingered after meetings. Golf references. Mentions of a leadership podcast. What Ryan understood, and what took Ethan longer to see, was that he wasn't competing on output. He was competing on narrative. When the promotion announcement arrived in inboxes at 4:32 p.m., Ethan sat very still for a moment. Then he requested a feedback meeting. His manager chose his words carefully. "You're exceptional technically." A pause. "We just need to see more leadership presence." "What does that mean, exactly?" Ethan asked, his voice level. "It's hard to define. It's more about how the room feels when you're in it." How the room feels. Not the data. Not the output. The feeling. Ethan drove home that evening in silence. He thought about the kite in the maple tree. He thought about his father's folded arms. He had spent his entire life trying to make the room feel something, mostly awe, or at least respect, and he kept being told he was almost there. Close. Just not quite. Close was the most exhausting distance. The firm had recently committed to public diversity goals. Panels. LinkedIn posts. Inclusion workshops. As one of the few black engineers in his division, Ethan was occasionally asked to sit on panels. He agreed each time. He prepared thoughtfully. He showed up. But he noticed something, slowly and then all at once. He was visible as representation. Ryan was visible as leadership. They occupied different categories, different tracks, different ceilings. When leadership described Ethan in hallway conversations, the kind he wasn't supposed to overhear, the words were solid, dependable, hard worker. When they described Ryan, dynamic, forward-thinking, future-facing. Same firm. Same flaw. Different adjectives for men who arrived at similar outcomes through different doors. He brought this to Olivia one evening, carefully, as though testing the weight of the words before setting them down. "Do you think it's the race thing?" she asked. "I think it's everything," he said. "The race thing. The quiet thing. The way I don't play golf. So learn to play golf." He looked at her. "I don't want to learn to play golf." A small silence settled between them. "Then what do you want?" she asked. He didn't have an answer. He had been so focused on the next level that he had stopped asking whether the climb was taking him somewhere he actually wanted to go. Olivia didn't need luxury. She needed presence. She wanted Sunday mornings without laptops. Dinner without Slack notifications. Conversations that weren't interrupted by just one more email. She had said this, in various ways, over several years. Each time Ethan had nodded, agreed, and then worked later the following week. The loneliness had arrived slowly, the way cold enters a room with a bad seal, not all at once but gradually, until one day you realize you've been shivering for months. She couldn't name the exact moment it began. Maybe it was the birthday she spent eating takeout alone because he had a deadline. Maybe it was the miscarriage, early, quiet, a thing that happened and was then absorbed into the week without ceremony. She had needed to talk about it. He had needed to get back to the proposal that was due on Friday. He had held her that night. He had said the right things. Then he had opened his laptop. She didn't blame him exactly. She understood, in the analytic part of her mind, that he was carrying something he didn't know how to put down. But the heart does not reason in that register, and her heart was simply, steadily, going hungry. At a non-profit volunteer event, she met a man named Marcus Reed. He listened, really listened. He remembered things she'd mentioned in passing. He looked at her when she spoke. It felt like water after a long thirst, and she told herself it was just friendship, just finally feeling heard, just being silly. It was not any of those things. Marcus was a high school art teacher with patient eyes and strong opinions about coffee and documentary film. He asked her questions about her research as if the answers genuinely mattered to him. He touched her arm once, briefly, absently, and she felt it for the rest of the day. She knew what it meant. She told herself it meant nothing for 4 months. The night it crossed a line, Ethan had cancelled their anniversary dinner at 6:47 p.m. by text. He was sorry. The client call had gone long. He'd make it up to her. The restaurant had been booked 2 months in advance. She had bought a new dress. She sat in it at the kitchen table and ate leftover rice alone and felt something inside her go quiet and final, the way a door sounds when it latches. She texted Marcus. She did not lie to herself about why. When she said she needed space and went to stay at a friend's, she stayed with Marcus instead. For a week she let herself exist in a world without deliverables. Brunches. Late conversations. No performance review for anyone. The first few days had the texture of a stolen vacation. She slept well. She ate slowly. Marcus lit candles on the table without being asked and put music on and let silences exist without filling them. She thought, so this is what it can feel like. She thought, I don't want to go back. But she also knew, somewhere quiet and honest, that she was experiencing the best version of Marcus. Marcus with no mortgage, Marcus without accumulated grievance, Marcus in the opening act, before the weight of 2 lives pressing together had a chance to show what he was made of. She had been here before, with Ethan, when everything was still potential and Sunday mornings were sacred and no one had yet failed anyone in a way that couldn't be explained away. Then reality arrived, the way it always does, in the form of rent and groceries and a raised voice. Marcus, under pressure, was a different man than Marcus over brunch. She saw it in a single moment, his hand lifting in frustration, not striking, but the gesture carrying its own weight, and the romantic narrative she'd built collapsed immediately. She sat in his bathroom for 20 minutes afterward, on the edge of the tub, and did the accounting she had been avoiding for months. What she had been running toward was not Marcus. It was the feeling of being seen. What she had been running from was a marriage that had become two parallel solitudes sharing a lease. Neither truth absolved her. Both were real. She thought about Ethan at the barbecue, standing alone in the corner checking his phone. She thought about the half-finished sketch propped against the wall. She thought about the man she had fallen in love with, the one who drew buildings from memory, who said he had been waiting until he was sure, who stood at the train station 3 minutes longer than he needed to. That man was still in there. She knew that the way you know a thing that has never fully left you, even when you've been trying to. She did not go back because she had nowhere else to go. She went back because she was not finished. And because, in the cold clarity of that bathroom, she realized that what she wanted was not a different man. It was a different marriage. And she didn't yet know if the one she'd left could become that. But she wasn't willing to abandon it before finding out. She came home. Ethan opened the door. "You're back," he said. No shouting. No scene. Just a stillness between them that was worse than shouting, a fracture made quiet by exhaustion and something neither of them was ready to name. They did not talk about it that night. Or the next. Ethan worked longer hours. As if promotions could repair betrayal. As if exhaustion proved worth. But Olivia had come back, and something in that fact lodged in him alongside the injury of it. She had left. She had also chosen to return. He wasn't sure what to do with either truth. One evening she came into the study where he was working at 10 o'clock and sat across from him. "I need you to know something," she said. He looked up. "I didn't leave because of him. I left because I was lonely inside my own marriage." The sentence sat between them. He wanted to argue. He wanted to explain the pressures, the deadlines, the weight of what he was carrying. But something in his chest recognized the truth of what she'd said before his mouth could form a defense. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to be perfect," Olivia said. "I'm asking you to be here." He nodded. He meant it. And then the next week came, and the deadlines returned, and he stayed late again, and the gap between what he intended and what he did went unnamed between them like a third presence in the apartment. Ethan began waking at 3 a.m. mind racing. Replaying meetings. Rewriting responses he wished he delivered more sharply. His jaw tightened in sleep. His chest felt heavy during presentations. He told no one. Because somewhere in the wiring of his childhood he still believed that pressure was proof of worth. That suffering quietly was its own kind of strength. At the next annual review, leadership told him he was close. The word settled over him like a ceiling. He had been close for 3 years. He had begun to suspect that close was not a description of progress. It was a management technique. At a networking mixer, a senior partner introduced Ryan to a client as our rising leader. He introduced Ethan as our technical backbone. Backbones are essential, Ethan thought, standing there with his drink. But they don't sit at the head of the table. There was no warning. It was a Tuesday. Ethan stood at the head of the glass conference table, the city skyline behind him like a reward he'd spent his entire life earning. The downtown redevelopment proposal was on slide 12. A multi-million-dollar client sat across from him. Senior partners lined the sides of the room. Ryan sat slightly to Ethan's right, composed, observant, still. Ethan moved through the presentation with clean precision. "Based on our revised structural modeling," he said, clicking to the next slide, "the redistributed load variables reduce long-term material fatigue by..." It hit him mid-sentence. Not pain exactly. Impact. Like someone had slammed a heavy door inside his chest. His breath stopped halfway in. The air felt thin, artificial. His heart began to pound, not fast but hard, each beat violent and out of rhythm, like a drummer losing control of tempo. He gripped the edge of the table. "Ethan." A client's voice, confused. The room tilted. A roaring filled his ears. His vision narrowed until the edges dissolved into gray. He tried to say "I'm fine," but no sound came. His knees buckled. The laser pointer slipped from his fingers. Voices exploded. Someone caught his shoulder too late. Then everything disappeared. He came back to white light and the rhythmic beeping of a monitor. Ceiling tiles. Hospital. And 4 in his arm. Olivia was there. She wasn't crying, but she looked like she had been. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around his hand, not gently, but desperately, as though grip alone could anchor him. A cardiologist stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, you experienced acute cardiac distress triggered by prolonged hypertension and chronic stress overload. Heart attack. Ethan managed. Not a completed event. But you were extremely close. Your blood pressure on arrival was dangerously elevated. Your heart rhythm destabilized. The doctor set down his tablet. Your body does not interpret ambition as strength. It interprets prolonged stress as threat. And today, it overrode your calendar. The monitor beeped. Steady. Stable. But fragile. You have a heart, the doctor said. The question now is whether you'll listen to it. Olivia's composure finally cracked. You stopped responding, she whispered. They said you weren't answering. He turned toward her. And for the first time, the cost of his ambition was not abstract. It was sitting beside him in a hospital chair, still holding his hand like he might vanish again. The night he was discharged, the city felt too loud. Chicago traffic hummed below the apartment windows. The world had not paused for his collapse. But something inside him had. Olivia helped him out of his jacket slowly, carefully. He told her she didn't have to hover. She said she knew, and didn't stop. He expected to feel grateful. Instead he felt disoriented, the way you feel in a room after all the furniture has been moved. The space is the same, but nothing is where your body expected it to be. At 1:12 a.m. he was still awake, staring at the ceiling. You're thinking, Olivia said beside him, about dying. The word landed heavy between them. She moved closer, her hand resting over his chest, not as comfort but as reminder. His heart beat under her palm. Still there. You're here, she said. I almost wasn't. I know. A long pause. I thought about that. How close it was. How we were in the middle of everything and not actually talking to each other. He turned toward her. I don't want to waste it, he said quietly. Not dramatically. It was the most truthful sentence he had spoken in years, and it surprised him with its simplicity. Then don't. Cardiac rehab forced a new rhythm. Morning walks by the lake. Shorter workdays. Therapy appointments twice a week. He hated the slower pace at first. He sat in his therapist's office, Dr. Anita Monroe, a calm woman with an unhurried manner, and felt the urge to be productive even in grief. He wanted bullet points. Homework. Actionable steps. What do you want from these sessions? She asked in their first meeting. To get back to normal, he said. What is normal for you? He described his routine, the early mornings, the metrics, the performance reviews. She listened without interrupting. When he finished she asked, quietly, and when did you last feel like yourself? Not like your job, like yourself. He thought about it for longer than he expected. Eventually, without planning to, he mentioned the sketchbook. He mentioned it in passing, as an old detail. But Dr. Monroe held it carefully. You packed it away, she said. Not because drawing stopped mattering. Because someone laughed. He didn't answer. The silence was its own answer. Transformation, he was learning, is not a door you walk through. It is a room you fumble around in the dark, hitting the same corners repeatedly. One afternoon at the office, he was back on reduced hours, which humiliated a part of him he was not yet finished with. Ryan's fellowship nomination was announced in a company-wide email. Applause moved through the open office like a wave. Something old stirred in Ethan's chest, the urge to accelerate, to prove, to reclaim ground. That evening he found himself at his laptop past 9. Olivia came in and closed it gently. Choose, she said. One word. No lecture. He looked at the closed screen. Looked at her. Looked at his own reflection in the black mirror of the lid. Old Ethan would have reopened it. He stood up instead. He was not entirely sure why. It was not a triumphant moment. It felt more like choosing a direction in a dark room, based on the memory of where the door should be. Progress looked like this: 1 week of therapy, then missing a session because of a deadline. A walk by the lake that became genuinely restorative, followed by 3 days of lying awake at 3 a.m. A conversation with Olivia that went somewhere real, followed by an argument 2 days later that circled the same unresolved wound. The wound. She had left. She had come back. Neither of them had fully said what that meant. It lived in the apartment like weather. One Saturday morning she was making coffee and he came into the kitchen and watched her for a moment, the way she hummed without noticing, the way her hair fell over one shoulder. I want to do better, he said. Not as a project. I mean I actually want to. She turned. I know you do, she said. I just need to see it in the ordinary days. Not in the grand gestures. The ordinary days. I know. And I need to tell you something. She set down her mug. I wasn't just running to him. I was running from something that wasn't working between us. That's on both of us. Not just you. The admission cost her something, he could see that. He crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her. Thank you for coming back, he said. Thank you for still being here to come back to. He returned to full hours in the spring. The work hadn't changed. The office hadn't changed. Ryan was still Ryan, now with a fellowship on his LinkedIn profile, his narrative more polished than ever. But Ethan had changed in a way that was hard to explain and easy to misread. He was quieter in meetings, but a different kind of quiet, not the quiet of someone suppressing himself, but the quiet of someone who had stopped performing and was trying to think. He pulled his manager aside one afternoon. I want to revisit the leadership conversation, he said. Not to complain. I want to understand what executive presence actually means for someone who looks like me in this firm. Because I've been watching for 3 years, and I think the definitions aren't neutral. His manager's expression shifted, not defensively, but carefully, the way a person looks when they've been handed a question they've been avoiding. That's a fair point, he said finally. It's a conversation we should probably have more openly. It was not a victory, but it was a door that hadn't been there before, and Ethan had knocked on it standing up. He also, one evening, took the old sketchbook out of the storage box in the closet. He set it on the desk and looked at it for a while. Then he opened it to a blank page and picked up a pencil. He drew nothing in particular. Just lines, at first. Then the shape of the conference room. Then the skyline from the window where he'd been standing when his body gave out. He drew it from memory, and he got most of it right. It was not a masterpiece. It was just a drawing, done for no audience, going nowhere. He sat with that for a long time. Then he drew himself, small, at the center of the page, and around him, the office, the hospital room, the kitchen where Olivia made coffee, the playground with the maple tree. All the rooms he had ever been in, held together on a single page. 6 months after the collapse, Ethan's briefcase contained a proposal. A new infrastructure project, one that would require him to lead a team differently than he'd led before, to build something collaborative rather than simply execute. It was exactly the kind of work he'd have killed for 3 years ago. The kind of work that, if it succeeded, would make his contributions impossible to absorb into someone else's narrative. He had been sitting with the proposal for 2 weeks without submitting it. On a Friday evening, instead of staying late, he came home early. He surprised Olivia. They made dinner together, something they had stopped doing when the hours got long. They ate with the radio on low. They talked about small things, a film she'd seen, a podcast he'd started, a joke from his session with Dr. Monroe that had made him laugh unexpectedly. After dinner, he brought out the proposal and set it on the table. I've been scared to submit it, he said. Of failing. Of winning. And becoming that version of myself again. Olivia looked at the proposal, then at him. That version of you wasn't wrong about everything, she said. He was just wrong about what mattered. He picked up the document. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows. Chicago moving on as it always did, indifferent and alive. He thought about the kite in the maple tree, about his father's folded arms, about a cardiologist saying your body does not interpret ambition as strength, about Olivia's hand pressing over his heart in the dark. He thought about a boy who drew what he wanted the world to look like, and a man who had forgotten that the drawing was where the truth lived. He set the proposal down. He wasn't going to submit it tonight. Tonight was for being here. Tomorrow, he would decide. And for the first time in his life, tomorrow felt like enough. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.